All right, welcome in to another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of HockeyRoyalty.com. We got multiple guests on here tonight to talk about the Flames and our resident Flames fan and Joe Paterino. But you know what to do. Get in the chat, like and subscribe. Let's go. That was the intro by Ezera, their new song Blind, out now. Listen to them wherever music is listened to. How you guys doing? We got Kyle and Dylan. Dylan's from ArmchairGM podcast, and we got Kyle from Flamescast here to talk about our Flames. How you guys doing, fellas?
Doing fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Awesome. Glad that you're here. Happy to talk about the Flames. As Randon knows and any Hockey Royalty fans know, I'm always up to talk Flames. So I'm excited.
Let's do it.
How you doing, Rando?
Excited to get into it.
Good, man. Just excited for the Kings win. We're recording right after the game there. So Kings little hat trick for Quentin Byfield. Guy looks like an absolute manimal out there. And if you caught our last night's episode, Bold Predictions, our resident expert here, Russell Morgan, picked him to lead the Kings in points for his bold prediction. And then 2 apples by Brent Clark. Joe and I think he's going to get 50 points as a defenseman for his full first rookie season. So big, spicy bold predictions, early returns in the preseason looking good. I'm excited for some Kings hockey. I'm excited to talk normal hockey. So we got some experts in here for the Flames. If you guys have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We're going to get started with a little farewell condolence. Obviously, Johnny Gaudreau, taken from this earth too soon. I know you guys are Flames fans. You got a jersey up in the background there, Dylan. What did he mean to Calgary? What did he mean to you guys, watching it for so long and at a high level in that area? And then, how he meant to the city of Calgary?
Well, he sparked a love for hockey for a lot of kids in Calgary, I find. And also just a lot of people who had kind of fallen away from hockey. The Flames were pretty mediocre for a lot of years, and honestly, a lot of years after Gaudreau showed up. But him and Monahan were really the first, sparks of hope. And Gaudreau really showed the skill of the game that we hadn't seen in Calgary for many years. And it's a shame what happened. Obviously, a complete tragedy. Feel so much for his wife and his family and his kids and his brother's family, wife and kids as well. And it stretches all over. You see the love going all over throughout the NHL and Kevin Hayes and his family, all the stuff they've gone through recently, and Sean Monahan obviously going to Columbus. It's just been layer after layer peeled back. His wife's pregnant. It's just layer after layer. It's been really sad and just a crying shame.
Kyle, what's been your biggest memory for Johnny Hockey?
Oh, you can just think of when he got drafted and, the first couple of games when he started, whenever that was, almost 10 years ago now. Probably that first game against Vancouver that, he was in. The immediate one that comes to mind is that game winner in Game 7 against Dallas. So there's some obvious ones I think that come out. And kind of alluding and adding on to what Dylan mentioned there. I think what's been kind of amazing to realize over the last couple of weeks / months since this happened, it's amazing how many people he's really inspired, right? You see Cole Caulfield changing his number. You see a lot of younger kids who write their own memorial pieces about, hey, I'm also undersized trying to play, whether it's hockey or whatever, right? It's it's amazing to see how many lives that he really impacted and that, we didn't really see in the first place. So I thought that was kind of really touching to note. And there's a lot of kind of key memories when you look at over his career, but some of those kind of come to mind first.
Yeah, it's tough when a star like that kind of gets taken off the world too soon. So, and it's just really something that kind of puts everything in perspective. Go tell your loved ones you love them, because you never know when's the last time you're going to talk to them. And heartfelt. Gwen in the chat says beautiful memorial. So really going to be missed in the hockey community. But let's get started with this season. I know that most of the hockey world and even some of the media up in Calgary has already written off the Flames. Kadri was asked about playing through another rebuild, and he said, hey, hold off a second. Why don't we just let us play at least get on the ice first before you guys are talking about me playing through another rebuild. Backlund said he wants to be a part of a solution for this team. Seems like the vets are pushing him back on that a little bit. Like, hey, we got some young stars coming up. We're not, dust and bones yet. Like, we got some fighting us. What has kind of been the vibe within camp so far with the vets and how they've kind of approached the season? Kyle.
Oh, okay. I think it's clearly a new chapter, right? Whether Colin Ray wants to admit that it's a rebuild or not. I'm really starting to see, or what I'd like to see this season is, I want to see some of these veterans take on that leadership role. It's been great to see some of these young guys get a lot of minutes in preseason, and they did the documentary recently too about the behind the scenes and seeing them in camp. One of the guys that's been really impressive throughout the entire management core was one of the guys we acquired from the Elias Lindholm trade, which was Hunter Prustevich, which everybody's going to butcher his name how many times, but he's a very gifted 19-year-old offensive defenseman that he's very, very fast. He can set up plays very well, and he's just a very exciting guy to watch. So, but overall, so far up to this point, throughout training camp and preseason, it's a lot of depth, and it truly is a competition in this camp that not everybody's making this team clearly, and they really want to push these guys to see, like, this is the start of something new. Let's see kind of what we have here. And there's a lot of guys that are really starting to show their true colors. One guy, another one too, his name's Adam Klapko, who's 6'8". We don't even know what he's on skates, but he's a big man, and he's kind of almost earned his way into
Rob Blake special, if you will.
Right, exactly. And so, he's kind of earned his way into the lineup a little bit. Coronado's had a really strong start. Peltier is kind of coming around the corner a little bit here. I want to take the thunder too much away from Dylan here with all this talk, but I'd like to see some of these younger guys develop as the season goes on, give them some pro minutes, let them play, and I'd like to see some of these veterans take on that leadership role. Yeah,
man. I mean, you were talking about the leadership role that the veterans have been taking. And I think the biting back in the media, whether it's Kadri saying pump the brakes or Uyghur and Backlund and all those guys, they've really been almost smart asses towards the media when they've the media will straight up come out and ask them questions like, when the Flames, inevitably sell or maybe the Flames aren't going to be that good this year, and how does that, whether you're going to do
after these guys sign long-term deals, by the way.
Yeah, after all these guys sign long-term deals, right? And so they all start biting back, and that's kind of the leadership thing. Like, what do you expect them to say? Whether they believe it or not is a different story, but what do you expect them to say? They're not going to say, oh yeah, we're going to lose a bunch of games, right? Like, the Flames, they might be a little bit better in the long run of the season than a lot of people think, but they're not really in the mix for the playoffs, in my opinion. Maybe they will be. That would be fun, but when it comes down to it, it's all about the youth, and camp has been exciting. I mean, we got rolled over last night, but for the most part, we've been we scored 6 goals in 3 straight games at the beginning of preseason, and then won 2 more games before we lost one, right? Like, Sam Honzek's been amazing.
Yep.
Like you said, Hunter Prustevich, I think as a 19-year-old being that close to NHL ready for a defenseman is absolutely amazing, especially as a lot of people didn't really think he was going to be a huge part of that Lindholm trade. Everyone was kind of more interested in the first round pick and all that type of stuff. And I don't know, the youth has been exciting, and I think the city of Calgary has really embraced the rebuild, right? Whether or not the players and the coaches and all that are going to say it's a rebuild.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah. You mentioned the youth, and in kind of a theme for us recently has been like the young guns. The Kings have like this injection of kind of young, exciting players. So I definitely want to touch on that. But first, you guys both mentioned that these guys that signed long-term deals, Uyghur, Kadri, Huberdeau. I think Mackenzie Uyghur is one of the more underrated defensemen in the league. I love him. I think he's
100%.
awesome. So that's working out okay. I think Kadri's been pretty good. I don't know if you guys would think the same, but I think he's been solid. The elephant in the room here is Jonathan Huberdeau. That has not gone well to date. I mean, I was on our show saying, hey, the Flames don't write them off after that offseason because they got in Huberdeau, who I loved. Can you get where are you guys at with Huberdeau at this point? He is what he is in terms of the contract, but like as the player, can he find it again, or is this a big problem going forward?
It kind of started back when he got traded, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing with why he did so well back in Florida with the 110, 115 point season, it's because of the fact that he was playing alongside guys who were pure goal scorers, right? Whether it was Barkov or Hagee, et cetera, whoever he was on the line with. You transition him now over to Calgary, where he was kind of looking around and there was nobody really to step up to the plate here. So for Huberdeau, I hope that he can kind of embrace this restart here a little bit. I think it's really exciting that one of the things that we've seen work really well early on in this preseason is the addition of Anthony Mantha just for the 1 year to kind of revitalize his career and maybe trade him at the deadline for some value. It seemed to work really well so far. I'd also like to see him at some point with a guy like Kuzmenko, who was brought in specifically to score goals on the power play, again, try to revitalize his career a little bit more. So for him, it's a matter of probably be the bigger leader in the room because of his status, I guess. But also at the same time, just embrace this as it is, right? We understand what happened here the last 2 years with you. It's come and gone, and as long as, at least for me, if he can find anywhere between 60 to 70 points this year with this lineup, I'm not going to complain about it too much.
Well, you could complain, and maybe a good area to complain in would be with one of our sponsors here at THPN from BetterHelp. All of our podcasts at THPN are sponsored by BetterHelp. So whether you're trying to learn a new skill or learning to cope with how bad your hockey team can be, BetterHelp is a place for you. It's helpful to learn positive coping skills, how to set boundaries, how to empower yourself to be the best version you can be. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, or even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. Well, we talked about the youth movement at the Kings. We got Byfield scoring a hat trick. Clark taking his first full season. Spence getting a lot of minutes now that Doughty is gone. You guys are not shy on young prospects that need to take the next leap. Why don't you guys talk about some of the names there? And like you mentioned, Conazari, Coronado, as well as a few others. What are the expectations for them, and where do they kind of fit in the lineup? Why don't we start with Dylan this time?
Yeah. Well, I look at some of those guys you were talking about, like Matt Coronado had a really strong start to preseason. It kind of fallen off in the last couple games, but I think that's one of those games was played almost half on the penalty kill, so you can't really take all that much into that. But we've got all sorts of really exciting young players. For some reason, I'm not seeing all sorts of room on the main roster for them at this point in time, like especially on defense. And we signed Barry today for some ungodly reason. But it just seems like him and Mantha and some other guys are kind of like blocking some of these younger guys. But at the same time, having these guys growing in the system is so exciting. There are a bunch of them are going to get a chance, whether it's Coronado, Honzek, Kristevich, all these guys. They're all going to get their chance, in my opinion, in this season at some point. Zari, as you can tell, I've got a jersey up there. He's probably my favorite forward on the team currently. His hockey IQ is next level. There's just something about him, the way that he, for a smaller guy, the way that he wrestles on the boards and the way that he kind of comes off the boards and attacks at the exact right time, so nobody is in the way of him. Got a nifty little wrist shot, and he's also like, I find a bunch of his goals, he's like behind the net, like behind the goalie, almost in the net, and he's scoring goals from like the goalie's out of the net, and he's scoring goals basically on the line, right?
Yeah.
He just knows where to be. Zari's basically my favorite forward on the team right now, like I said. What are you thinking, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm intrigued with Honzek too. Honzek, and I can't get my eyes off Rustevich either. I mean, he's been sensational. I think they kind of compared him, or I think it was Ryan Huska who compared him to like a younger Rasmus Anderson, right? So again, I'm just excited to see how he develops. I'm excited to see what he does in the AHL because they brought him down already as a 19-year-old, which is really cool to see. But yeah, as the final days kind of loom here where they got to make a decision here, I imagine that Honzek goes down as well too. Just for context, he was a guy taken 16th overall last year, had some injuries, and now he's trying to bounce back into this roster and try and get some minutes here. So, and then overall, again, I'm going to go back to Adam Klapka, man. He's going to be somebody that I think people have to look out for a bit this year. He's going to play on this fourth line, I assume, with Ryan Lomberg, depending how they juggle it, maybe with Pospisil as well on this fourth line. And that's not going to be fun to play with. Yeah, it's not going to be fun to play against, right?
No,
it's disgusting.
We're going to lose maybe a lot of games this year. We'll see what happens, but that's not going to be a fun fourth line to go up against.
Pospisil's going to get in there and piss some people off, excuse my language, and then the whole other team's going to look up at Klapka and be like, you know what? Never mind.
Pospisil's good at that. Pospisil's good at.
They'll skate right up to him and go, "Whoa."
Yeah.
You, Dylan, I think it was you'd mentioned, or one of you mentioned Ryan Huska's name. So this is his second year. Speaking of young, he's not a young player, obviously, but he's a young coach in terms of his NHL experience. Do you see him as the right guy, the right fit for a team that is in this transition, but B, and they have all of these young guys, and it sounds like, and I thought this, and it sounds like you guys kind of agree that it's one thing to have the prospects, but these guys are prospects that I think are pretty close to the NHL. I don't think this is like you got guys that are like 3 years away. Everybody we've talked about here, I think you could conceivably see in the NHL this year, even if not, for the length of the season. So how did you guys like Huska's first year behind the bench, and do you see him as the right fit to kind of take this young group into this next phase of the Calgary Flames?
Yeah, I do. I think Huska's, come up through the system. I can't remember if it was Kamloops or Kelowna where he first started, and then he moved on and I believe he coached the Calgary's AHL team when they were still in, I want to say Adirondack, but that's wrong. Stockton. They were in Stockton. And I believe he coached them because I think he coached both Lomberg and Rasmus Anderson when they were in Adirondack. Sorry, not Adirondack. You know what I mean. Stockton. I'm rewinding myself quite a few years here. But yeah. So I think that he's always been really good with young players. And I think his strength is actually like being tough, like quite tough, but also fair. Like he'll actually, like, you look back at some other coaches the Flames have had, like Sutter, where it's just tough, but not really fair. You know what I mean? I think with Huska, it's more like you get another chance to prove yourself before you're just written off. Like Peltier was just written off a couple of years ago, right? Yep. And it's really been affecting, that, and the injuries have really been affecting Peltier since then. So,
is he hurt
the next
now?
guy that I was going to drop off.
Sorry, Brandon. Is Peltier hurt right now?
No.
Is he healthy now? Okay.
Sorry. So that was
he was hurt. He got hurt at the beginning of last training camp, and then was hurt for about half, 3/4 of the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the next guy I brought up because he's still young. I mean, he's looking at, you're like at 23 years old. He was drafted in the first round, 26th overall in the 2019 NHL draft. We have a player in the name of Adrian Kempe that took a while to get going on. And I know Kempe showed more flashes than what Jacob has shown, but he's still an offensive player, a little bit undersized. Is this coach kind of the right coach that kind of unlock Jacob? I know injuries kind of hampered that last season, but would give him the run to maybe progress offensively within this new system?
I would hope so. The problem is, and I kind of alluded to early on in the preseason with Coronado especially, there's a lot of spots being taken up by the additions of Kuzmenko and Mantha on this team. So it's really hard to find a way to get these guys integrated into this lineup, wondering where Sharon Govich is going to fit.
Yeah.
I think by the time final cuts are said and done, that Peltier and Coronado throughout the season will be finding some ways. The other thing to note is that they can't really cut Peltier because he'd have to clear waivers, and I'm not sure he would clear it. So my guess is that he probably sticks around. But in terms of leadership, I think Huska is the man for the job. I think the big takeaway, and just it kind of going off Dylan's question a little bit and adding into yours here, is that everybody's bought into this system. I don't think it's necessarily, you go back to the old days of the Red Wings, right, in 08 and 09. Like, it's not Mike Babcock, right? Like, he's not the guy at the top. I think when you look at this here, it's just a huge collection that everybody seems to be buying into this system. Everybody's all bought into that. This is the start of something new. This is the start of a rebuild, if they want to use that word or not. Mm-hmm. And everybody just seems like they look locked in, right? When they brought out this documentary from episode 1 the other day, just watching it, they all just look like, okay, we know what we have to do and we know where we are as a group. And I think Ryan Huska just has a really solid core around him as well, too, with Conroy being the GM. You got Iginla as well, too, just as an advisor. I think he's an advisor, but it just speaks to, especially it helps that Dylan mentioned, too, with Huska, where he had his time in Stockton, where he's had time with these younger players, had time to develop, right? We now see where Rasmus Andersson is, and it might give Peltier that chance as well, too, to kind of come into the league and try to be one of his own here in this top 9.
Is there any of these young guys that are maybe not? May answer the own question because Kuzmenko's here, Mantha's here, but I haven't followed like the preseason to see enough what the line combos are like. Are any of these young guys able to crack into that top 6 or a top power play? Or are they right now looking to start maybe bottom 6 and maybe second unit type of thing?
I think that's basically Peltier's saving grace, is that he fits more as a 4th line type player at this point, whereas guys like Honzek and Coronado, maybe not so much Morton, but other guys who are waiver exempt are better fits for the top 6 or the top 9. In Calgary, it's not going to be a 1st, 2nd, 3rd line. It's going to be a top 9, all getting relatively around the same amount of minutes, in my opinion, depending on the game. I think that Peltier fits that kind of defensive 2-way, maybe not that much upside type of player to be able to, not be negatively affected by playing 4th line minutes.
Sure.
I could see them waiving him too, but I don't really think they will. I
don't think they can.
I don't either. And the only reason is specifically Montreal, with all the injuries Montreal's had in the last couple of days.
Yeah. Just
some disgusting stuff. But I just don't see Montreal not taking a stab on him while Laine's out. And I think Slavkovsky got hurt at some point, and they are going to need, they're going to need someone, right? So
And
I
it
can't
just-
see them
yeah.
not picking him up if they
And it
can.
just seems like the Flames aren't in the market right now to be giving up on a young player.
No.
Not giving up. Obviously, there's the risk that he could, or the chance that he could clear and make it down. But it just seems like it wouldn't be a smart move for them to even risk it. It's just, it's not worth it at this stage. Where the Flames are right now, it's not as if this is a player that, he'd be nice to have, but we're kind of stacked. We're ready to make a deep playoff run. We're going to try to send him down. This is not where they're at. It just seems like it would make more sense to keep him around if that's the case.
Yeah.
And I do kind of agree with that. I see a lot, especially on that behind the scenes series that the Flames just started the other day. There's a lot of talk about, always earned and not given, which is actually a Flames motto from the Bob Hartley days. But they've kind of brought that back, and guys have jumped him on the depth chart, right? Jacob Peltier has upside, but right now it's looking like Sam Honzek and Sam Morton and Matt Coronado and William Stromgren, even like there's some guys who have passed him on the depth chart. And if they're really going with that always earned and never given type of motto, then are they going to keep him? And again,
They got to see. I think they got to see first.
I think they got to see too, but
yeah,
I never know.
You can try and give them that 10-day window, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I mean, as Kings fans, we've had upwards as high as the number one prospect pool, and we've always been like, how come they don't give Samuel Fagemo a chance, right? He's got 40 goals in the AHL. We need scoring. We need the power play. And then it's like he gets up and then they waive him and he goes to Nashville. And then he's like a career AHLer, right? So it's like, and then we're, we need to get Brent Clark. He's ready to play on the team right now. And then they give him 9 games and send him down and they're cautious. And then it's like, so they're just cautious with their prospects because they have these starters, but then they kind of shed these players and players like Mantha could be like, okay, at the deadline they shed him, and then that young prospect gets the second half of the season, right? Or if the Calgary gets it together, then Mantha stays on the roster and they're in the playoff hunt, then he doesn't. But you kind of see him on the Weeble wobble or the of a team where it's going to be where we at come January, February.
So here's the problem. And it all comes back to that trade with Tkachuk. Those conditions, along with Montreal, we sent them Monahan and a first-round pick. Yeah. This all comes into fruition this season, right?
Oh.
They don't have a choice. They need to be bad. Because the second they enter outside that top 10 at the end of the season, Montreal will more than likely take that pick. So,
I mean,
it's
a
be
lot.
good if you want.
If they're 11th. If the Flames are 11th,
in
the NHL,
correct.
Montreal gets our pick. If we're 10th worst, we keep our pick.
Correct. So you can be good if you want to try, but it probably won't be worth it in the long run. So for a lot of us, it's kind of like, okay, well, we just want to see a little bit of development here, but we can't lose that pick this year. Not after we just got another first-round pick from New Jersey from the Markstrom trade this offseason.
Yeah.
Because you're like, okay, well, if the pick is 25 or 21 and up, like you're an actual playoff team, that's not that's not too bad. But if you're 12, 13, 14 in that, to where you're not really a playoff team, but you're barely in the lottery, that would be devastating because you get a lot of times, and a lot of the draft experts we talk with, and every draft's different, but the cutoff is usually anywhere between 13 to 16 where the elite talent is and the difference makers are. And to give up one of those would be rough, especially if the dreaded R word is really what you're doing. Giving up one of those picks is not going to be easy.
It'll be tough because you also want to see from our guys, Kuzmenko and Mantha, do really well. Trade them at the deadline to get some assets, unless
add Barry to that.
Decides correct, unless Kuzmenko wants to extend for whatever reason. You want to see them do well, but at the same time, it's like, for us, we're like, no, let's just write this year off, man. We need the pick.
We really do, especially over the next couple of years. The thing the Flames are missing the most in their pool right now besides Connor Zary, pretty much, is centers who aren't above 30 years old, right? And the Flames seem really iffy on if they want Zary to be a center or not. Personally, I think he'd be a great second line center, but over the next couple drafts, there's some really, really good centers in the top 10 of both of the next two drafts. And we could really, really use some high elite talent at center, because we've got some really good wingers in the minors and some really good defensemen in the minors and in junior and all that type of stuff. And we have, for the first time in the entire time I've been alive, we actually have a lot of goalies in the system that look like they could be something. And we just need a couple centers and one of them to hit.
I'm a big draft guy, and I'm a big armchair GM type guy, where like draft season is my like haven, you know. And when the Kings are going forward, I'm missing those picks. It's just not really like, it's like, man, I want a first, you know. And so this year we actually had one, and we had all this draft stuff, and I just kind of view it as like, you got to stockpile. And if you're like, oh, I need a center, or I need a defenseman, or I need this, like, those players are not ready. So what are we getting? They're not playing for your team next season.
No.
Calgary might look completely different. And I understand the pipeline, but I think my favorite term is like their franchise currency.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you trade them away for other assets or trade them away for an elite, I mean, you could use that top 10 pick and trade them away for an elite first line center for a team that maybe is rebuilding, or a second line center or something like that. Or, you know, like we traded Brock Faber, who now is an $8 million defenseman, because we needed Kevin Fiala, and Kevin Fiala fit more on our team and what we needed at that point. So I think the currency is just interesting, and just trying to stockpile as much talent as possible, you know, and not trying to, like, as a fan, as a Calgary fan, like going through this kind of a retool, like just getting enough assets and not really trying to like pinpoint where this asset is going to play on the NHL roster, but just like, am I getting the best player available at pick whatever? Is this guy going to be the best? Is the type of talent that we want to acquire with this regime, and then let the chips fall where they may, you know?
You see, that's a really interesting point, because I've got into it with quite a few people who don't seem to want the Flames to pick first overall this season. Now, I don't think we're going to be that bad, but in Fantasyland, we get James Higgins, right? In Fantasyland. Now, the Flames and the Flames fans have this Adam Fox complex where they think every American wants to leave Canada. And I don't specifically buy into that. We had Hannafin for like 6-7 years. We had Gaudreau for 10 years. Rest in peace. You know, not everybody just wants to leave instantly. If you get James Higgins, what is that worth on the trade market? A lot more than the second overall guy, most likely, right?
But you're drafted the first overall player. I mean, you're talking about 10th pick. Now you're talking about the first overall pick.
Oh, no. That's Fantasyland.
You would have to have some dirty blackmail to get Celebrini away from San Jose. You know,
exactly, right?
That's a franchise player. You don't draft a guy assuming he's going to leave, right?
No,
you draft a guy assuming that he's going to be there forever. And like, I know Tkachuk is, you know, taboo world up there, but you can't make a pick assuming the worst out of that player. You got to assume that he's going to be your next franchise. You got to embrace him. You got to bring him in. And if the culture is good in Calgary, it doesn't matter where the player is from. They're going to stay there because the culture is good, right?
Yeah.
Like Sutter's not everybody's cup of tea. And there's a lot of LA Kings fans that love Sutter, and we thank him for the 2 cups, but that's not everybody's cup of tea. And not every player is going to respond to a coach like that. So if the culture is good, when they start drafting these young talent and they start bringing them up, they're going to stay because they're going to want to be there. I mean, Kings have had Brown his entire career there, Kopitar their entire career. I'm sure they're going to have Byfield to sign another contract. He's going to want to sign another contract. Like, they're locking these players long-term because LA is a place that has so far been where people want to play, and the rebuild has gone a lot easier because of the culture there. Now, has it always worked with who we brought in and the 131 and Todd McClellan. No, but overall, the veterans have established a culture worth staying for, and the young players are buying into that. And it seems the culture so far this year, they have bought into it. The veterans have, and the young kids, and you just need to continue to grow on that. And the draft picks you guys have, or hopefully you're drafting those guys because they fit the culture you want to bring in.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the goal, right? That's 100% the goal, and that's why, you know, a lot of people are trying to trade all of our veterans, and it's like you have a Blake Coleman who's sitting there saying he wants to be in Calgary, saying he's won a couple cups. He's, you got to keep some of them because that's culture setting, and that helps young players look at them and be like, you know what? I want to be a part of this, right?
You can't just have a World Junior team on an NHL roster.
Exactly.
You know, that's, yeah.
We have a fan question here in the chat from Gwendolyn F. The Saddle Dome is the first place she saw an NHL game. Did she hear right that the Flames are getting a new arena, and what's going on with that?
Yeah, so 2027 is when it's ready to go, and that's kind of like the timeline for when they want to start being competitive again. I think that's kind of what's been talked about a little bit. So, yeah, from what we've seen on an architecture standpoint of what it looks like, they needed it because it looks really good. And just for those of you who haven't been to Calgary before, just where it is wise, like Saddledome, where it is right now, it's where everything is with the Stampede. It's a huge park, and it's a really good spot for it, and it's a really good place for it in the city itself. So yeah, like just seeing like initial pictures of it, it's a breath of fresh air that these guys need, and it's exciting for when it'll come.
So another prospect that we really haven't talked about kind of takes over for one of the kingpins of the franchise in Markstrom, and Dustin Wolf, at 23-year-olds, looks to kind of take the reins in the crease. Had kind of a little rough go, as much young goalies do, but a lot of promise with him. What does he kind of look like? How's the vibe been for him in camp? Where's his head at? And what are your expectations with him in the crease?
We actually have quite an interesting threesome of goalies right now with him and Vladar and Cooley. It's causing quite the actually pretty good vibe in camp. I've been liking what Wolf has been bringing this year. The way that Dustin Wolf tracks the puck and the way that he shadows it, like you can see if you watch just Dustin Wolf, you can see the way he shadows and tracks the puck, and he doesn't have to make a bunch of wild saves because he's just there all the time. He's got to work on not making himself look smaller than he already is. Actually, we're on the Kings podcast, so I've heard lots of Jonathan Quick comparisons when Quick was younger. Of course, Quick was pretty good pretty quickly. I'm sure you've heard that quite a few times, but
Dad jokes are always encouraged.
Amazing. Dustin's been quite good. The thing is, again, with the waiver exemption thing, he's the only waiver exempt guy that we have. And Devin Cooley's been really good in camp as well, and so is Dan Vladar. Whether they clear waivers, I don't see a world in which Dustin Wolf goes down, at least to start the season. But all three goalies have been good, and Dustin's been really, really fun to watch. He had a hard game last night, but he was playing with the Flames C squad against the Jets A squad. Like, it was Scheifele, Connor, Ehlers, Morrissey, like they were all there, Hellebuck, right? And he got shelled in the third period, and that's going to happen a lot to him this year. But I think he really, even though his stat line wasn't that good last night, I thought that he played really well. Almost all of those goals against were absolute. Like, he had no chance on pretty much all of them except for maybe one or two. and all of the other games he's played this preseason, he's been really good. So
we talked
I'm excited for him.
Yeah, we talked earlier, right, about guys like Jacob Peltier's. Does he have like a spot? Could he get waived? It seems a little odd that this Flames team could actually go into the season with 3 goalies. That seems to be an opportunity to where you don't need to do that, and you could keep a Peltier, one of these other younger guys. The kicker is the only guy that probably most people want to make sure is up is waiver exempt. And we've been through that in LA with some defensemen over the years, but I don't know, like to me, and this is an outsider, I mean, it seems like either Vladar or Cooley would make more sense to get waived, assuming they could likely clear. But it just would seem to take the air out of some things in that vibes in Calgary if Dustin Wolf goes down.
So I've been seeing different in the preseason a little bit. I've been seeing Vladar play well. And not to say that Cooley hasn't been playing well, but he's going down to the AHL. They're not going to start the year with 3 goalies, and he's going to go down to the AHL. I think it's going to be a foregone conclusion that he's going to go. And I think we kind of knew this months ago that this is going to be Vladar and Wolf. And this is nothing to take away from Devin Cooley. It's just he's going to get a chance still to play as a full-time goaltender for the AHL Wranglers, and we'll see what happens, right? My understanding is that Vladar is going to get game 1 of the season in net. And they're going to split a lot of these games up between the two of them. And it's going to be a real battle to see who's going to get that number 1 spot, right? It's not saying much because Vladar came in as a backup goaltender and then Wolf coming up as a brand new rookie, right? So Vladar, I think, has been playing so well, in fact, that I can see him probably getting more starts this year than Dustin Wolf. If that's the case, and it's not too bad, something else that you have to consider is this. Look at the Canucks, what happened last season with them in the playoffs with Demko, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden, the Smith goes down, and all of a sudden, Sheloffs has to come up, and he played very well. There might be some playoff teams out there that could use a backup goaltender just in case, right? And if Vladar has that type of year, well, then all of a sudden, it's possible he becomes an asset at the deadline, right? So outside of that, though, just kind of starting from where we are today, I think Vladar is probably going to get more starts in my eyes. As good as Wolf has been, I just think that Vladar has had more NHL experience. Not to say that I don't think he's a starting goaltender in the league. I think he is still a backup, but he's had more experience. He's played a lot more games than Dustin Wolf. He's been there, done that. Wolf's going to come up and play some games here. I think he's going to get 40 to 50 games, give or take. We'll see how it goes throughout the year. They'll split it pretty evenly, but I think to start the year, we're going to probably see Vladar play a little bit more than Wolf.
It's definitely not out of the question. And I do think that Dustin Wolf and Vladar, like Vladar had a really rough last couple seasons, but he had a hip cartilage problem where I don't know exactly what it's called, but basically his there were areas of his hip where there just wasn't any cartilage anymore, and he got all of that replaced. Again, I'm no surgeon, but I've heard some goalie experts talk really highly about this surgery and how some goalies have come back better than they've ever been. So I'm really intrigued about Vladar as well. I won't say I think he'll start more, but I could see him starting about the same. And I do think Cooley will get a few throughout the year, but I think, they'll
all get their turn.
Yeah, they'll all get their turn. And I don't think Cooley's been bad. I think Cooley played against McDavid and Draisaitl one day and stood on his freaking head.
It was good. He was really good. Yeah,
he was really good, and he's played a few games that were really good and a few periods that were really good as well. I think the Flames are in a really interesting 3-headed monster situation right now, and I don't even know how to handicap it. Like I could see it landing anyway. I just can't see Wolf going down to start the season at least. And I could kind of see a three-headed monster thing for a month until one of them plays their way onto the AHL.
I want to also, last thing, just pump the brakes a little bit because, yes, it's a three-headed monster. Compared to the rest of the league and the goaltenders, maybe the caliber of quality is not up there.
No, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, on the Kings podcast, we're hashtag goalies. Like we don't believe in paying anybody, and we're rolling with Kemper and Rittich.
I'd rather have Kemper than Dubois any day of the week.
I agree.
I would not. I'm sticking to it.
Okay. He's gonna die on that flame.
Dying on the hill. It didn't work. It didn't work. But I would rather have Dubois.
Well, what could work for you is betting with our other sponsor here at THPN is DraftKings. Whether you call it a TD tutty, in for 6, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. We don't care how you score. We want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app now and make your pick. Look at a couple of games here. You can take your pick at all 5 plus 550 bets for first touchdown scorer against Breece Hall, Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, all have the highest odds to score in that game. Now, odds are subject to change, but you got to take your pick in that matchup. So what I urge you to do is go and download DraftKings Sportsbook app because you're ready to take a touchdown dance of your own. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet on touchdowns. Download the Sportsbook app now. Use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in New York. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE-NY, which is 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill and Casino and Resort. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling and resources, see dkng.co/ftball.
That was impressive.
That was really impressive. You're pretty good at those ad reads.
That was really good.
That's all I'm good for as the host, just hammering down those ad reads. Well, I might be good at ad reads, but we need to talk about the strengths for the Calgary Flames here. And obviously you guys are, the shadow tank is what it sounds like based on you. You guys don't want to go out there for the tank, but a little shadow tank. But what are some of the strengths maybe of this team that if the team were to be maybe better than what we think, where is that coming from?
Oh no, you can go, Dylan.
You're good at segues too, by the way, as the host. I think
he gets a lot of compliment on those.
Oh, good.
So kind of a thing, like a couple people in our chat that always come in, like give me a grade, like every like segue.
Wow.
They're like, oh, that was like a B plus, or they're like, oh, that needed work, or 10 out of 10, and like it's become like of a thing in the chat. Like I get like graded like I'm an Olympian for
you're getting like nightmares waiting for an F or something like that.
I'm always sitting here while people are talking. I'm like, okay, that's a good segue. Wait, no, pull it back. That's a good one. Yeah. Pull it back. Yeah. So, but go ahead, Dylan. So where is the positives here? Where is this team going to kind of really like hit their stride? If they were going to make some waves, where do you see that happening?
So we've already hit on a few of these things. I'm going to start with Ryan Huska. I think the coaching has the opportunity to make a team that doesn't look that strong be better. And I know that he's young and he's going to go through growing pains as well as the team is. And he's also got a lot of forward depth, which is another strength. There's no star power, but there's forward depth. There's a lot of depth, right? Like I said, there's 3 lines that can score. There's 3 lines that can, 2 lines probably that can defend well. And I think that has the opportunity to throw other teams off where you're not, it's going to be tough to match up, right? when it comes to not having that one stacked line or those two stacked lines. You're going to have another wave of, Coleman coming off. What did he have? 30 goals last year, and
something like that.
Apparently playing with Zari, who is probably going to take another step forward on that third line. And then all of a sudden there's another line that you got to defend really well, right? So I think that's important and definitely a strength of the team. And like I said, Ryan Huska and management, I think the attitude of the coaching staff and the management is really good. And honestly, even though there's been a couple moves where I've questioned Conroy, it's come back to bite me in the ass whenever I've mentioned it. So I think he's got a plan, and I'm all for it. I'm just going to sit back, mention some things, but sit back and trust.
Well, Dylan, like you're mentioning the waves, and the Kings fans are familiar with that. We haven't really had that apex first line, and it's no slouch of Anze Kopitar, and Kempe scored 40+ goals, but the last year, the vibe with PLD and Dano was, hey, we're gonna have this wave of center depth, and it's just gonna be relentless. And if we lose a player for a couple of weeks, you're not gonna really see a fall off, because this line plays the same as this line. The identity is that way. Kyle, is that and even though maybe the apex talent isn't there on the first line, with the likes of Edmonton and whatnot, but Is that kind of the vibe that you're getting from Calgary this year, that we're going to see a lot of consistent hockey in the top 9, even though the talent might not be the upper echelon, but we know what we're going to get night in, night out from our identity?
Yeah, even a couple of years ago with this D-core, right? Like, I considered it to be probably a top 5 D-core in the league, and this is just coming from them not even having a true number 1 defenseman, right? It was a lot of guys who were, you can make arguments for them to be that number 2 guy, that could be that number 3 guy. And that's what you're right. That's what you're going to see a lot too throughout the entire defensive roster, throughout the forwards as well. A couple of guys you got there in goal, but if we're just looking at forwards from what you mentioned there, like your top 9, like it's going to flip flop all year. It's going to change a lot, and guys are going to get a little bit uncomfortable playing in different positions, and it's just going to be a lot of changes with that. And I think because it's the start of this new process, I think what management and these coaches just want to see is that, okay, A, how do you handle these kind of changes in these uncomfortable positions? And B, how do you thrive? How does it come game time now in the moment, right? And what are you doing with this guy? How's Mantha with Huberdeau? That's working really well, right? And it's going to be a lot of changes this year. That first line is, you could maybe throw like Nazem Kadri being a center on the first line, not typical. He's normally, like, you stick him back in Colorado, he's a second line center, right? So you can almost say the same thing again with these forwards and these D-core. There's no true number 1 guys, but it looks fairly consistent that, okay, you can make an argument to be on the second line. Okay, your fourth line, you could be third line. And, there's a lot of variations with that throughout this lineup. And sometimes it's not a bad thing. But again, guys have to earn their spots pretty soon, and the days are coming.
Joe, you've talked about that D-core, and from the outside perspective, where do you think like the identity of the Flames team is going to be?
I mean, I certainly liked it in the days of when Weegar was there, when Hannafin was there. And actually a player I want to talk about. Thank you for bringing this up. Oliver Shillington. So he doesn't stick around. What was the story there because it seemed like from a cost standpoint, pretty low, obviously. What was the fit was it just over? Like what ended up happening there? Not to like pivot into a totally different direction, but like, I love this kid. And I know he went through a lot off ice, and it was an injury or illness. Forgive me, I can't remember exactly, but I was so into this player, and I think Colorado got themselves a damn steal. But what do you think, and what happened there with that situation?
Sorry, Dylan, I just want to take over this one here. Because it's so intriguing. So essentially, in a nutshell, what happened was that Shillington he was going through personal issues. I think it started in the summer of last year, if I'm not mistaken, Dylan.
2 years ago, I think.
2 years ago. Yes, 2 years.
Because he missed that whole season, right?
Right. So he missed basically 2 seasons of hockey, right? The Flames stepped back. They said, you know what? That's totally okay. Go do what you have to do, right? And they were very complicit throughout this entire process, right? He came back late last year, played in some games, looked great, and everything was good. And, all signs were leading towards an extension because of the way this was treated. I think Shillington, what ended up happening, I think it was the agent's fault at the end of the day, because Shillington was asking for, I think it was probably upwards of 3 to 4 million. And the organization's kind of sitting there going, whoa, hold on a second here. You've missed 2 years of hockey here.
Yeah.
We got to get you back in here. Like, I'd like to bring you back here for a year, like around probably a little bit lower than what Colorado offered him, because the guy's been out for so long. He only played 5 or 6 games with the team late last season. And now all of a sudden he wanted to ask for like close to 3-4 million. My numbers might be off. I'm just speculating here, but it was so far apart that the agent kind of screwed it up because he thought his value was so high. And Shillington is obviously siding with his agent, right? So they go into this whole debacle. It falls apart. And now Shillington will kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to test the open market. And every other team is thinking the exact same thing as what Flames organization management was, right? Because they thinking he's that number and everybody else was thinking the same thing. And Colorado just happened to go, you know what? Maybe we do need something like this. And they got him for what he was worth. And that was the most frustrating part, was that the agent really fumbled the ball on this because he thought the value was so high for him. And, it's still a great player to have in Colorado. And I'm glad they have him. I wish we had him back.
Yeah.
But kind of looking at it now, like seeing what some of these young guys on defense and what they're doing, getting Kevin Ball from that Markstrom trade. You see Bruce Stevich all of a sudden doing really well with this young core. There's a lot of young good D-man coming up, and maybe it was just time.
Yeah, I mean, he was a big time target for me, and he's.
Let's just say if Joe was Rob Blake, he would have got us 3 to 4 million.
Oliver Shillington would have gotten paid. So it's.
Can I chime in on that one?
Please do.
So from what I understand, and this is just from I listen to a lot of Flames talk radio, Pat Steinberg and Wes Gilbertson and a bunch of the Flames radio people. And from what I gather is Oliver Shillington and his agent thought that there was a deal on the table from another team that was worth more than Conroy. I don't know how much it was, but it was worth more than what Conroy wanted to pay him. And he said, okay, well, you go get that. And if you can't, come back to us. And then free agency hit, and that team had something else come their way that they preferred.
They filled the role. Yeah.
So they filled that role. And then by the time Oliver Shillington and his camp came back to the Flames, we had signed Jake Bean.
Yep.
And it was too late. So Conroy moved on because he thought Shillington moved on. And the agent overplayed his hand on both situations. And then had to wait for what was it, half a month until he got signed, and I can't remember how much it was, but it definitely wasn't nearly as much as the Flames.
Just over $1 million. Yeah,
the Flames would have been willing to pay him on an extension, right? So,
if
it is what it is, and Shillington was an exciting young prospect at one time, and I wish him the best because his mental health took a real fall there, and that's kind of what happened. Took a year and a half off, and by the time he came back, we just had all these defensive prospects in the system, and it's too late.
And I'll be the one to say it. It is a little bit crummy for Shillington's team. For you guys to go through all that, you really can't work out a deal if you really wanted to stay. Mind you, again, you bring up the point with all these prospects at the end of the day, and maybe that was one of the common reasons, but it is a little crummy for that side to go through all of that, to be that respectful, because we know how, we've seen what happens with the Blackhawks in the past and their scandals, right? And like how different teams handle these sort of things, Montreal and Logan Mailloux. And for that to kind of go down like that, I just thought it was just really disappointing, to be honest with you.
Well, Dylan just gave me nightmare fuel because he mentioned that he heard that, he thought there was a deal on the table, and then this other team ended up filling the role with a different defenseman. And if you mean to tell me that the Kings signed Joel Edmondson for the albatross contract that they signed him for instead of Shillington, I'm going to lose a lot of sleep, which I'm sure it wasn't, but that's the first thing I thought of. But
when that happened, the first thing I thought was 4x4 to Gudbranson in Columbus.
Yep.
Same
Seriously.
deal for you guys.
That's right.
I mean, don't see, I should, Randon, every time it just gets brought up every podcast, and I'm it's a good thing I lost all my hair already, because I would lose more.
There's nothing else to pull out.
Well, Joe, you could just use our code THPN at BetterHelp and get 10% off your first month of therapy to deal with this Joe Edmondson thing.
Hey.
I do want to
say,
because Randon, you asked about the decor, and like it's still an intriguing decor. I think, like I said before, I love Mackenzie Weegar. I think Rasmus Anderson's really good too.
I'd love if he stayed. He's one of my favorite players.
Yeah.
I was just going to say with him, like his patience might run thin in the next 2 to 3 years.
And if he doesn't stay, whatever the return is on that contract for that player will be pretty good. But I'd rather him stay.
Jake Bean's always been a guy that's like, I think a few years back was like one of these younger kind of analytical darlings for a little bit. Always a guy that I'm intrigued by. So curious to see his season. Kevin Ball, I mean, by all accounts, he was pretty solid in New Jersey.
Huge.
Seems to be a good fit here for Calgary. So like I still think this decor, it may not be to the level it was. I totally agree with Kyle. I legit thought this decor a couple of years ago was easily top 5 in the league. Like I thought this decor was excellent, and obviously they've taken some hits as the team has kind of been in transition here. But I still think it's I don't know that it's a weakness necessarily. I kind of think it's an interesting decor, and that doesn't even include some of the young guys in the AHL that you guys have talked about here that are kind of knocking on the door. So I think the decor could be a quiet strength for this team.
Totally.
So right now, The Athletic and Dom Decision has come out with all these models about where their figures and what team, and everybody kind of gets up in arms about my team's better, my team's worse, and all this kind of stuff. And it all comes down to percentages, right? And where they kind of feel it's going to be. And they have Calgary right now in 5th, with the Ducks and no, I think, was it 5th or 6th? I think it was 6th. But anyways, they're in the bottom half of the Pacific.
Yep.
We talked about the things that can go right. Obviously, maybe some of the Ducks maybe take a tier up with their young talent. I still think the Sharks are going to be in the gutter there at the Pacific Division. But if it goes wrong for Calgary, where does that happen? And then what kind of like finish are we talking about here for this team?
Their major issue is who's going to score goals this year. It's been that way for the last 2 years, and it's going to continue to stay that way. Their quiet strength, as Joe just mentioned there, is going to be that defense. In goal, you're going to have some reliability. You'll have some off nights, but you hope that Wolf will kind of turn the corner. So you're going to look at that forward group, and your hope is that Kuzmenko and Mantha can kind of revitalize the career a little bit, and that Kadri can pot some, and maybe Zari breaks through this year. Who knows? But it's going to be really – and then Sharon Govich, who we really haven't even talked about tonight, it's going to be really tough to find out who's going to lead this team in goal scoring this year. It could come from literally anybody, and that's kind of a scary thought when you don't know. When you look at a lot of these other teams, Tampa and Kucherov, Leafs and Matthews, McDavid, all that stuff, right? Obviously, they're big-name guys. You can – if you ask around the league to a lot of these teams, who's the guy that you're going to turn to when you need a goal the most, 90% of the time, they're going to give you the right answer with the guy on the team that they can easily point to. With this team, I don't know where it's going to come from. And it might be right in front of our face, or maybe it's just hidden underneath some layers.
See, I kind of look at it another way. Like, maybe you won't know who it comes from, but it'll come from the goals will come from the goal scorers that we have. Like Kuzmenko really started to show up at the end of last year after he came back from being sick. And Sharon Govich scored, what was it, 31? Kadri scored
over 30, yeah.
Sharon Govich, I think, is going to take another step now that he's comfortable in Calgary and doesn't spend the first quarter of the year on the fourth line. I think that's really going to be big for him. But when it comes to weaknesses, I think it's the defense. I think that Rasmus Andersson is good. very good when he's on. I think that Mackenzie Weegar is very good all the time. But after that, like, who is Jake Bean? Who is Daniel
Yeah.
You know, Braden Pahal can hit. I really like Braden Pahal, but he's what, a fifth or sixth? Jake Bean is what, a fifth or sixth? Miramonov is playing on their first pair. What is he though? He's Tyson Berry is what he is. And then we have Tyson Berry. So, you know, I see our defense being a problem, and I think that even if our goalies play well, even if they play really well, I think our defense is going to be so leaky that the goalies are going to be made to look bad because of that, even when they're playing well. But then we have a bunch of inexperienced goalies, which is another weakness. Whether they play well or not, they're all inexperienced, and they are going to have some rough games, especially with that defense in front of them. I think our defense, our good defense, comes from 4 players, which is Rasmus Anderson, Mackenzie Weegar, Blake Coleman, and Michael Backlund. That's where our defense comes from. Other than that, when any of those guys aren't on the ice, we're hooped.
Maybe it's both our points.
And that's how you get a top 5 pick.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. And when that Barry news first came out today that we signed him to a 1-year deal, I was upset because it seems like it's blocking a cycle of young guys that can kind of come in and learn on the fly, go back to the minors and get top minutes in the minors, use what they learned in the NHL to get better in the minors. And there's like 5 or 6 of them who can kind of do that. Like, we've got so many good young defensemen that are almost ready. You can kind of cycle through them for that 5th, 6th defenseman spot. And we didn't even mention Joel Hanley and Jared Tenorti, who were like, why?
Well, Tenorti was sent down today, so
yeah.
Well, I mean, we feel you in Kingsland. I mean, we had to deal with Andres Englund last year and Trevor Lewis, and we're like, hey, we got all these players that can play for us, and we got Alex Turcotte, we got Fagimo, we got. I don't know why nobody likes Jacob Mavara. Like, he's just a phenomenal, third pair defenseman. And you get all these.
Kaliev is sneaky.
You get all these roadblocks. I mean, he's in the doghouse. The doghouse is he's so far back in the doghouse that I don't think you can even see his leash.
Which sucks because he's got some crazy scoring touches. Like, I like that kid.
He's got a shot. And now he's hurt.
Is he hurt? I didn't catch that.
Yeah. We had these. So like the Kings play these scrimmages. So they have like half the team practice and then they scrimmage and then the other half the team practices. And like the first 2 scrimmages, like the hitting was just at another level. Like, it was like okay, like I've never seen like this in much intensity, and he just got popped like right in the shoulder, and like the second day, and he's out. And like the whole like we had an episode like 2 days before that, like, okay, this is a fresh start for Kaliev. He seems like he's got his good head on his shoulder, yada yada yada, and then he just gets whaled in the second practice, and he's gone. So,
can I ask how the vibes are doing around Drew Doughty being out now for a bit long term ish?
I mean, I think it's generally pretty optimistic. I mean, obviously not that you want Drew Doughty to be out, but I think there's a lot of buzz right now around Jordan Spence and Brant Clark. I think that is really, really what's gotten it's getting Kings fans over it, the Doughty injury. So we'll see. I mean, it looks like it's going to be Jordan Spence that gets the nod to play with Mikey Anderson on the top pair, which to me is a no-brainer. I think that's the call. The question is, where does Brant Clark slot? Because the Kings made the genius play of acquiring Joel Edmondson for 4 years by $3.85 million for the sole purpose to play with Brant Clark, which is a little interesting because now Doughty's hurt and Gavrikov is your second pair. So who do they put with Gavrikov in the top 4? Is it Brant Clark, who it should be, or is it Kyle Burrows, who it shouldn't be? If they sign Edmondson to play with Clark, that means Clark's going to get third pair minutes with Joel Edmondson. So I don't know what happens there and how that ends up shaking out. It does look like Clark's going to at least get the first look at PP1 at a minimum, which he should. But, I think what helps with the Doughty injury is the news came out that, it's conceivable that he could be back, maybe even before January. So I think that really altered things. If it was like, hey, he's done for the season, there might be a little bit more of a cloud over things. But I think Spence, Clark, and the fact that Doughty, this isn't season ending, it's been generally, as positive as it can be, I guess.
I think there's a lot of, so last year it was Doughty, Roy, and then they were going every other game or every third game with Spence and Clark on the right for the third pairing. And it was man, just give them, they both should be on the ice. We wanted Clark to play on the left. Andres Englund is a traffic cone on the ice out there. So we were okay, let's play both of them. Because when I went to the Dallas game, they were letting Clark play offensive zone face-offs with Drew Doughty. They were fine putting two righties on the ice then. So why can't you do it on a 5-on-5 consistent basis with Jordan Spence? And a lot of people don't really, outside of LA, know who Jordan Spence is, but every single metric that, Joe is the beautiful mind over here with all these advanced stats, but all the metrics that you can possibly think of, Jordan Spence is top 3 on the team. And it's really interesting. And the only thing we talked about yesterday is he can defend with his legs and his stick and his brain, but will the vigor of an 82 game season, which he's never played, on first line minutes, which he's never done at an NHL level, will that affect him with his size? Because he's a $185, right? So that's the only thing that maybe I'm a little bit worried about as far as the toughness of the season. And we play in kind of a easier division, right? Vancouver, what are they without Demko? Sharks are rebuilding, Ducks are rebuilding, Calgary Flames, we've been talking about them all hour, what are they? And so Kraken, who knows? So even if the team plays subpar or 500 hockey for the first 2 months, we get Drew Doughty back in January, we could still make the wild card or maybe even the third seed, depending on what Vegas does. So it's I think there's a lot of there's a lot of optimism around, hey, Kings fans have been wanting these young prospects to stop getting roadblocked, and now they're getting shoved into prominent roles. So we really get to see what we have in them. And then the rest of the team is really good. We have a lot of good forwards. There is some question marks with players taking that next step. Can Byfield truly be elite? Will Fiala be allowed to soar because he's been stuck on the third line, playing with misfits for a couple times throughout the last 2 seasons. So yeah, there's a lot of what ifs. But it's definitely not doom and gloom from the Kings standpoint.
I just want to put it out there. As a Flames fan, Drew Doughty, not my favorite guy.
I can imagine.
Not even a little bit, but the talent is, undeniable, and you never want to see anybody get hurt. However, the timing was pretty spot on for me, because when they said that he had a broken ankle, I believe, is that what it is? Broken ankle. Was the night before 2 of my fantasy drafts. So I was able to snag Doughty in the last round of both of those drafts, put him on IR, and pick up. There
you
go. The power play kid, Brent Clark.
Oh, Brent Clark. Yeah.
Nice.
Nice.
On waivers there. So I've set myself up pretty good, I think, getting a couple power play 1 guys down there.
We loved
what's that?
We loved the Tkachuk Doughty feuds. I think
it was so good.
Yeah. Oh no, the feud was good and all that type of stuff. It's just funny how the whining is so much. It's so much.
I don't think
definitely got under his skin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And Doughty, if you listen to all the King stuff, and you listen to interviews, he never shuts up. He's constantly talking.
Yeah, it's
even to his own team, right? So, and it's just, I just think it's good for the game. I think storylines are good for games because Calgary's not really a rival, but that storyline kind of fed that matchup for a little bit, right? And I don't
you
think
guys were our biggest rivals for a year and a half because of it.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a good point.
But like storylines like that kind of fuel a sport that needs more storylines, right? I mean, and like I think basketball has a lot, football definitely has a lot. I think hockey could stand to have more. You know, like it's easy to point to like, oh, Colorado's playing Edmonton, so the battle of the number one centers, yada yada yada. But like having the gritty players and having those little feuds back and forth and talking trash and maybe throwing some fisticuffs, like it's cool. Like, you know, Daddy scoring that goal in overtime and he's waving bye-bye to fans in Calgary and then, you know, so I think it's good. I think it's good for the game and more of those little rivalries should happen. So
yeah, totally. I miss Tkachuk for many reasons, but that's one of the reasons, whether it be Doughty or Cashian or whoever else it might have been, that he got under the skin of it. It made games way more entertaining, even if we were out of it or if we were dominating, right? It just made everything more entertaining. And
it was one of the first things I thought of after the trade, that Tkachuk was like, thank God.
He's gone.
Can't deal with him anymore. Deal with him from being a good player. But I mean, you just knew, because there were games, some games it was just two great players going at it. There were other games where Doughty just was, his sole focus was Matthew Tkachuk. It wasn't even, you know what I mean? So it was like, thank God he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
He's pretty.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on tonight. I'll let you guys plug your guys' podcast real quick. So, Dylan, where can our listeners follow you and find you?
Well, we're on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it at ArmchairGM_pod. Check us out there. We're also on Spotify under the THPN banner, and Facebook and pretty much everywhere except for Instagram. We're not on Instagram, but pretty much everywhere else you can check us out. And we'd love to have you along.
Yeah, I just started mine recently, 2 weeks ago, as a little fun side project. I just put it up on X and Instagram, and then we go live on YouTube, but we always have the intention of just, you know, using that as a video. But also too, and more biggerly and more importantly, also one of the two men who run THPN as well. So we're really excited for this season. You know, it's kind of a transition year for us a little bit. This is kind of a new chapter, a new start for us. Made some crazy moves recently, and you know, you guys know it too with recent transfers and all that. It's a really exciting time though. We really like where we're at. And it's an important year for us too. So just excited to have everybody listening and following along. And we can't wait to get the season going and hope everybody can kind of be along for the ride.
Well, as always, no problem. As always, you can find all of our Kings content here at hockeyroyalty.com. All of our Twitter handles are floating across the bottom. Please take advantage of our great sponsors at DraftKings and BetterHelp, code THPN. And as always on this podcast, go Kings go.